All right, everybody, welcome to the Town and Country Compounding Podcast interview series, Not Just Healthcare Workers, Miracle Workers. My name is Steve, and I'm a pharmacist and the Director of Strategic Partnerships at Town and Country Compounding. I'm going to be your host today. We are interviewing the leaders of Vascarta, one of my favorite clients actually to work with because they're actually a pharmaceutical company. We are working with them not only on helping with formulations of their products, but also with the logistics of international clinical trials. And we also compound one of their products, Vasceptor, and it is available to be shipped to 22 states. The goal of this podcast is to showcase to patients, doctors, and investors so they are aware about this unique product. So first, let me introduce our guests. First, we have Dr. Richard Prince over here, Chief Executive Officer. Dr. Prince's 35-year career in industry includes multivariate management and executive roles spanning startup to commercial companies, small molecule and large molecule programs, as well as being on both the service and product sectors of the healthcare industry. Dr. Prince, let's give our audience some color to this impressive CV and why you started Vascarta.
Thank you, Steve, so much, and thank you for the opportunity to be here on your pharmacy podcast with my colleague, Dr. Joel Friedman. So I've been in the industry, as you mentioned, for many, many decades, and the focus has always been in the area of entrepreneurship, life science, companies, building them, and my background is in microbiology, tumor immunology, and I've focused on strategy, operations, corporate development. And over the last 15, 20 years, Joel and I, who have known each other during that time, have been talking about inflammation and the importance of it in healthcare and the fact that there's a need for a new product that's affordable and that can address in an easy manner some of the concerns connected to acute and chronic inflammation. So we started Vascarta. And Vascarta, we started in the early months of the COVID pandemic in early 2020. And since that time, we, along with some of our colleagues, have built a company that's now clinical stage, that we're very proud to say, in addition to the fact that it's commercially available through your pharmacy to patients in 22 states. And we look forward to discussing that with you today.
Awesome. And now Dr. Joel Friedman, who's the Chief Scientific Officer of Vascarta. Dr. Joel Friedman is a research scientist at the Albert Einstein College of Medicine. He's a professor and the former chairman of the Department of Physiology and Biophysics, where he holds Young Men's Division Chair in Cardiovascular Physiology. Dr. Friedman has been a deep expertise in extensive range of biomolecular and translational medicine modalities, including protein dynamics, hemoglobin, transfusion medicine, anti-inflammatory strategies, wound healing, anti-infective strategies, topical, transdermal, and IV drug delivery platforms. Dr. Friedman, pun intended, can you also give some color to your impressive experience? It's actually funny, your nose is yellow. It has to do with the product Vasceptor, but the reason you're using it is not so funny. It's actually pretty cool.
It's not a birth defect.
Yeah.
And my wife's going to have a fit because she warned me, make sure you get that off your nose before you start this.
Yeah.
But be that as it may, I guess it's a fairly common precancerous lesion, and I've been treating it with our topical product, and it works great. It clears it up, and there's no clinical trial as yet, but from my own personal experience, it's very effective at getting rid of these precancerous skin lesions.
Got it. And from your experience, why did you hop on the Vascarta bandwagon? You have this great experience that I can barely pronounce most of these words. How did and I'm a pharmacist.
No, it's a fascinating history and trajectory. I was a hardcore molecular biophysicist. I was at Bell Labs, pioneering use of lasers to study protein dynamics. Through that pathway, developed first nanoparticles and certain gels to deliver products and so on. When COVID came along, I realized that some of my strategies could, in fact, treat the cytokine storm, which is what kills people. But there was no way in the world that nanoparticles were going to be approved by the FDA. And Richard and I had been talking about it. And, I came up with this gel, this non-nanoparticle based gel, which allows for very, very high concentrations of hard to deliver therapeutics. Started with curcumin because I know a lot about it. And it's a potential wonder drug, but the problem has always been efficacy. Just don't get enough in, and what you do get in just doesn't seem to do the job fully. And it worked. When I first developed it, I put a drop on my forearm, and within a half an hour, my blood pressure went from sort of borderline hypertensive to perfect. Stayed there for a week or two. And Richard and I talked, and we put together this company. We believe in the product. We're moving at warp speed, and I think there's a tremendous opportunity to have an impact on many areas of medicine.
If I could just
Absolutely.
add to that, thank you.
Piggyback.
Let me do that for a moment, and to give our viewers some additional perspective about our company. We're based in New Jersey. We have a management team, full management team. We started the company raising several millions of dollars through friends and family, and we've been working at it for years on end, full-time sweat equity without salary, because we believe so much in this. We want to be able to provide to healthcare an affordable product that is versatile in terms of what it's able to do, satisfy unmet medical needs. We have multiple patents that we have been able to achieve through the United States Patent and Trademark Office, and patents are now being approved in other countries around the world. We expect that probably within the next 6 months to 12 months, we'll have anywhere from 10 to 20 patents. We're very proud about that. The point is, you need to have a product compounded here initially that is protected, that's affordable, and can satisfy an unmet need. That is the whole design of our company, and we're well on our way. One other thing I might add is that we are actively working to get the product registered in certain regions around the world, while at the same time we're working it here with FDA to get an IND open and an NDA open and approved at some point. We are seeking to get the product registered in places like India, like European Union, like Brazil, among other areas where the barrier to getting it into the market is somewhat lesser than it is here.
Cool. That's very impressive, and that's part of the reason why it's been so cool working with your company. First question is, what are the most compelling outcomes observed in patient-reported experience with Vasceptor, especially in terms of pain relief and reduced inflammation?
Sure, we've had quite a number of users so far, and invariably the response is there's a rapid, sustained pain relief far beyond what is achieved with oral NSAIDs or any other topical pain relief cream. The relief reported occurs in as short a time as a half an hour, sometimes it's overnight, but invariably it's very fast compared to any other anti-pain modality. And people have done head-to-head. They usually try, I'll try this first, and then they give up and say, well, let's try the magic yellow stuff. And they're amazed. I've gotten calls where people are just stunned. And my brother-in-law said, this SH.T actually works. I can't believe it.
Yeah.
Okay, so all right, so rapid relief of pain, resumption of activities. A close colleague of mine had a mother with bad arthritis. She hadn't been able to shop in weeks. He came by, I think one of the holidays, put it on her knees. It's like out of a Steve Martin thing where he suddenly gets up, I believe, and she goes out and she actually goes shopping for the first time in weeks or months. Mm-hmm. Very effective relief of a variety of pain indications. Osteoarthritis is probably the most extensively tried by the people who've used it so far. But also we have pain due to trauma, including post-surgical pain. We have one person who had a motorcycle accident. His knee swelled up, nothing was working, he was in agony. Put it on, next morning the swelling was gone and the pain was gone.
Wow.
And then he gave us a lot of money.
Became an investor.
Yes. Sciatica, which is really tough. You apply to the back, the lower back, the lumbar region where the nerve comes out of the spine, and it ramps down the inflammation and gets rid of the pain very, very quickly. Again, not extensively studied, but those who've tried it report very profound success. People with periodontal pain, the beginnings of abscesses, you just rub it on the gum, and a number of cases, just overnight, the swelling's gone, the pain's gone. This stuff gets deep into the gums. It's antimicrobial, it's anti-inflammatory, and it's anti-pain. So you got all the components to relieve periodontal problems.
Yep.
Several users have reported success in lowering their blood pressure.
Yep.
Very rapidly, and as opposed to when you take things like nitroglycerin or other nitro paste, where if you overdo it, you can pass out. The way this works, it's safe. You actually optimize the body's ability to lower blood pressure without overdoing it.
Right.
So that's a huge plus.
Well, that goes to the next question, like the side effects. So how does Vasceptor's unique transdermal delivery compare to oral curcumin formulations in terms of reaching and benefiting targeting issues, providing sustained relief, but also kind of like minimizing side effects?
Oral curcumin, which is taken by an enormous number of people, has limited therapeutic effect. It's been studied over and over. There are literally 1,000+ papers over the last several years, some clinical trials, and it typically takes very high doses given for days, weeks, months to get any kind of effect. And typically the therapeutic benefit is modest at best. Compared to what the promise is when you do these animal studies or cell studies, where it's clear you're affecting pathways that would lead you to believe that curcumin can be a wonder drug. So the low therapeutic efficacy, despite this compelling preclinical evidence of it being a potential wonder drug, is attributed largely, but not entirely, to low bioavailability. When you pop a curcumin pills, no matter how concentrated, no matter how many, it's hard to get it into the blood at an effective level. First, it doesn't get across the gut into the blood very effectively. The microbiome organisms break it down, create modifications. The vast majority of what you take gets pooped out. When it does get across the gut, it gets picked up by the liver. There's a thing called first pass processing by the liver. And a lot of the curcumin just gets modified, chewed up by the liver. Then it finally makes its way into the circulation, and there, it's by and large, is picked up by the circulating proteins like albumin, and it's rapidly excreted. The problem is, when you do it that way, how do you expect to get a lot of it to an aching knee, elbow, whatever? It's very hard to get locally effective delivery, and the systemic benefits are quite minimal because it gets excreted so slowly.
Right.
So targeting tissues that are inflamed, that are a source of pain, is a major objective. And that just does not happen with oral. We, however, can do that. So our topical transdermal gel can rapidly access the inflamed tissues. So if you have an inflamed knee, it gets to the fat pads, the peripatellar fat pads that surround the knee, which is where you get the inflammation, which creates the pain-inducing molecules and so on. So you get a lot into the right place, and you ramp down the pain and the inflammation very quickly. And as far as I know, there's nothing else out there that does this. The other thing is that topically delivered curcumin just does not get circulated very effectively. When we do it topically, our gel solvent carries the curcumin through the top layers where most topically delivered drugs end up. It carries it through and takes it down to the capillary beds at the bottom of the skin layer. There you have blood cells being squeezed through the capillary bed. So in effect, the local concentration of blood cells is extremely high. So the curcumin, the localized curcumin, now gets picked up very effectively by the circulating blood cells as well as the plasma. And there's never been anything like that with oral. So there's a big consequence to delivering curcumin via the blood cells. First, circulating blood cells can act like stealth delivery systems. As opposed to, say, nanoparticles, which raise all kinds of red flags with the immune system and get attacked. A red blood cell carrying curcumin, it's there's a nice red blood cell, I'm leaving it alone. So it circulates. And now when a red blood cell goes into another capillary bed, gets squished, it can deliver the curcumin to the endothelial lining of those blood vessels. When curcumin gets into the lining of the blood cells, the endothelial lining, that's where it can have its effect. So one of the things we see that you never see, no matter how high the dose for oral, you never see an effect on blood pressure. Sometimes in diseased animals, for giving it for weeks. But here, even in healthy animals, we get a drop in blood pressure within 30 minutes. And at the same time, see a rise in nitric oxide in the circulation, which is indicative of the curcumin effectively treating the endothelial lining. And this is for both healthy as well as sick animals. So this is huge. So you have multiple benefits of having the blood cells picking up the curcumin. One, the red blood cells can act like a stealth delivery system. And we know it can get across the blood-brain. It can deliver curcumin across the blood-brain barrier. We see rapid, very extensive, substantial amounts of curcumin being delivered to the brain. But the other thing is that the red blood cell is not just a bag of hemoglobin delivering oxygen. It is an active participant in vascular health. And when you have things like type 2 diabetes and certainly horrible diseases like sickle cell, the red blood cells are not functioning properly. They lead to vascular consequences. By picking up the curcumin, we've done studies in collaboration with the FDA, which we'll tell more about that in a little while, but we actually see that we can stabilize the red blood cell. and make the red blood cell an active participant in creating vascular health. That's huge.
Yeah.
Then the circulating white blood cells, the leukocytes, macrophages, and so on, they play a pivotal role in inflammation. And when they get overly activated, as in the case of a cytokine storm, that's what wreaks havoc. When curcumin gets picked up by these white blood cells, it repolarizes them from the active killer over-the-top pro-inflammatory cells to now repair, let's make things nice kinds of cells. So that's the way we can get very rapid relief of extreme inflammation, but also for chronic. And we have a publication where we show that one of the major consequences of the cytokine storm, where you get vascular leakage with basically your fluids just go right out of your blood vessels, we shut that down almost immediately when we apply this material. So huge benefits.
Yeah, so that's a potential treatment for COVID.
That's
really,
where
really bad cases of COVID.
Well, that's where we started out. That was our
cytokine.
goal. We actually had state senators contacting agencies on our behalf, and everyone said, yeah, this sounds great, but the emphasis is on the vaccines. And I get it, but I think there was a lost opportunity on the part of the country, because this would have been a simple, easy way to treat people who already have the disease.
At least to test it. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's interesting that you bring up nitric oxide because, first of all, we sell nitric oxide test strips because these are actually sublingual, it's saliva test strips.
I know it well.
Yeah, and we have a lot of supplements and also compounds that focus on that because of cardiac health, sexual health. It's just so important for your health. It doesn't matter what age. Even my age, I'm like 35. A lot of people my age suffer from ED, and it could be just from low nitric oxide levels, you know?
So I am so glad you brought that out, because as they say somewhere, nitric oxide has been very good to me. I've been one of the pioneers in figuring out ways to deliver nitric oxide, and nitric oxide science, and so on.
Yeah.
And I agree, those pills can do a lot, but they don't address the underlying inflammation that often leads to low nitric oxide.
Further upstream.
Well,
like
above
the root.
all streams, the bank, the base, the works.
Yeah.
Because what happens is that when you have oxidative stress in your blood vessels, you get that from just eating too many donuts or whatever, or having diabetes or whatever. It stops the lining of the blood vessels from producing nitric oxide. To make matters worse, it actually produces these reactive oxygen species, which just creates this vicious cycle.
Right.
So yes, you can overcome that by giving these supplements that produce nitric oxide, but really what you want is to ramp down that inflammatory process that wrecks the lining of the blood vessel. And that is what curcumin does for you.
Yeah.
So and I've used the strips. Actually, I want to get more from you.
Yeah, we'll do that.
To see how the nitric oxide levels respond when you take the...
Yeah, that'd be interesting to test during the clinical... I don't know if that's part of the clinical trial regimen, but it'd be interesting to do it concurrently with all the patients.
Could be. I mean,
especially
it's a
placebo versus treatment.
It's a trivial thing, just a little saliva.
It's so easy.
Yes.
Yeah.
It is. But also, as you've pointed out, nitric oxide does amazing things.
Yeah.
I used to go to the nitric oxide conferences, and everything from urinary tract infections, enhanced performance of athletes, and so on. I mean, nitric oxide is truly a wonder drug. And in fact, many of the very expensive drugs, if you trace what they do, ultimately, we make more nitric oxide.
Yeah.
So why don't you skip all that and get right down to it? Curcumin, it upregulates the enzyme that makes nitric oxide in the vasculature. At the same time, it shuts down the nitric oxide generating enzyme that's in the activated white blood cells, which actually creates damage. So it's double-edged.
It's actually interesting because I'm of Russian. I speak Russian, and one of the and borscht, which is like beet soup, is the most popular Russian soup. Beets increase nitric oxide.
Absolutely.
And then turmeric is like the most popular spice you could think of out of India, 1 billion people.
That's right.
Isn't it interesting how that turned out? Is it a coincidence that those became the most popular?
No, you're absolutely right. Beets have very high levels of nitrates, which your saliva turns into nitrites, which gets turned into nitric oxide.
Yeah.
Which is why you don't want to use mouthwash when you are trying to up your nitric oxide because that kills the enzymes that turn nitrate into nitrate.
Ah, okay. Maybe that's why my
Free
nitric
information.
oxide is low. Interesting.
No mouthwash.
So we kind of already addressed the different kinds of pain and inflammation conditions, but if you want to just kind of go at a high level to just really clarify for our audience so they understand.
The types of pain.
Types of pain, overall, the types of pain and inflammation conditions you see as the primary candidates for its use. We kind of touched on a lot of them already, but if you want to just like really at a high level, give our audience.
Okay, so our philosophy, which is supported by a voluminous amount of literature, is sort of based on the premise: as go your blood vessels, so goes your health. The vast majority of diseases and conditions that are costly to treat, that wreak havoc, that make your life miserable, come about because some trigger creates a condition called endothelial dysfunction, where the lining of the blood vessel, the endothelium, is dysregulated. When that happens, you're no longer making nitric oxide, you're actually making these reactive oxygen species, and that sets in motion a series of events that can lead to cardiovascular disease, renal failure, sexual dysfunction, cognitive decline. So our philosophy is that it's going to be hard to treat every one of those pro-inflammatory triggers. But if you can keep endothelial dysfunction under control, and we know from our preclinical work, we can both prevent it and reverse it. It might be a chronic management for a chronic disease, but it's going to avoid the kind of very costly consequences that are typically very hard to treat. You don't want to wait until your kidneys are failing or you have heart disease and so on.
Right.
This is a way. So, early stage diabetes, you start taking, our product, and it's our opinion, it's going to prevent the development of all the clinical sequelae by keeping the vasculature healthy.
Wow.
We also have shown that, and other studies have also shown that curcumin will improve insulin sensitivity and lower blood glucose, lower your weight, and so on.
Wow.
So it does have the potential to be a wonder drug.
That's amazing. Could you share more about the safety and tolerability of Vasceptors, especially compared to the topical pain relievers that exist on the market?
Okay,
There's
Yes.
Voltaren, there's like Icy Hot, all these kind of stuff. So, yeah.
Okay, so a lot of them are just designed to treat the pain, get rid of it, and they last an hour, 2 hours at best, and whatever, but they're not treating the underlying problem. Voltaren, in theory, does, but it's an NSAID-based product, and if you're above a certain age, or if you have to take it on an ongoing basis, a little bit of it does get into your circulation, and it's delivered systemically. Most people, it's not a problem, but for some people, having NSAIDs on an ongoing basis can have deleterious consequences.
Right.
In addition, Voltaren, the instruction, use it 4 times a day, whatever. Our product, if it does get into the circulation, we want it to get into the circulation, has the added benefit of being an anti-inflammatory, antioxidative stress agent that works globally. And things like arthritis, so you have knee arthritis, it's not just a local disease. It's typically coupled with systemic inflammation. So we're hitting it from every angle.
Right.
So, and also, what we're seeing is that there's no downside, there's no safety issue that we're aware of. Curcumin's been tested left, right, up and down, numerous clinical studies. It's regarded as safe by the FDA. The levels that we get into the circulation are typically comparable or lower than what you get when you take massive amounts. One difference is that when you take that orally, it goes down very rapidly, whereas we have sustained but safe levels in the circulation, and by virtue of having it being delivered in a targeted way by blood cells, we get this added therapeutic benefit. So no, there's no known safety issue. There are warnings that if you're on blood thinners, you shouldn't take curcumin, because one of the pluses is that it prevents coagulopathies. But there's no known report of any kind of enhanced effect in people who are taking blood thinners who are also taking curcumin.
Right, so theoretical precaution.
Yes, it
something
is.
to keep in mind.
And something down the road, this is something we'll probably test. I have colleagues all over the place that can test this very effectively.
So let's get nerdy, okay? You ready?
Nerdy.
You guys nerdy?
Well, he is, I'm less so.
So, how does the mechanism of action for curcumin and Vasceptor help address inflammation and pain specifically at the cellular level, such as through red blood cell stability, cytokine reduction? You kind of talked on it, but let's hear it even more nerdy.
That's not nerdy. This is divine wisdom. I mean, nerdy. All right, so curcumin is what's called a pleiotropic agent.
Uh-huh.
It doesn't just have one target.
That's nerdy. But I love it.
Nerdy is telling how I was abandoned at birth and raised by wolves, but that's besides the point.
Yeah.
All right, so most drugs that are used for inflammation target one particular pathway, and they knock it out, they obliterate it, and there's a consequence to do that. Every one of these pathways plays a role, so very often you'll be prone to infections or other side effects. Curcumin ramps down a whole cadre of pathways, critical pathways, that are involved in inflammation and oxidative stress. And it operates at the gene level. That's significant because a little bit of curcumin goes a long way. It turns genes on and off, and that leads to a cascading multiplicative effect where you get a little bit of activity and suddenly you're opening up an anti-inflammatory and antioxidative stress pathway. For example, there's an enzyme NRF2 which it activates and promotes its formation. That enzyme then turns on a whole bunch of other pathways that lead to other enzymes that control oxidative stress. So it's really, the analogy is a concert master. You have, let's say, a perfect symphony orchestra with all the greatest musicians, but you go in and it's horrible because they're not listening to each other. Curcumin says, oboe, listen to the violin, whatever. And it creates homeostasis, an organized, concerted effort. It's like having a good coach, on a football team where great players, but they're not listening to each other. So it gets the whole system to work together.
So what I would say to that, it reestablishes physiological homeostasis, right?
And it lets the body work properly.
Kind of like a thermostat in the body, just make sure that it's at that perfect temperature, so to speak.
Which again, wasn't found in the bottom of the ocean on some coral. This is pretty much the most popular spice in Asia, in India. So must have been for a reason. They must have realized it. They feel better, they feel good. Well, virality's good.
Let me speak to that briefly. Eastern medicine and Western medicine, right? So we have our own paradigm here in the West regarding treatments that go through a very rigorous process that we have spent our entire careers working on and working through. But in the East, there's a different paradigm regarding healthcare per se, and a lot of their natural medicines. And in India and China, for example, which is 25-30% of the population on the planet, they've been relying on curcumin on open wounds. They use it in toothbrushes, toothpaste to kind of take care of their gums. So it's just known either through trial and error, cultural over millennia, that it has all of these desirable effects. Thousands of years. And as Joel mentioned earlier, there's this vast scientific literature that speaks to all of this. What we've done, and I don't want in any way minimize what we've done because we think what we've done is quite substantial, is we've found a better way to get this wonder compound and make it into a wonder drug, as we define it here in the West, but clearly we have global aspirations. So we take all of the intrinsic attributes of, let's say, curcumin that are there, but they're minimized through oral administration, and through the topical administration, which is transdermally delivered through the gel, which is our patented technology, you unleash it all, you unlock it all. So all the pleiotropic effects that you're talking about can then quickly take place throughout that. And I will tell you, that's quite conscious. This isn't magic. When we set up the company, we were looking to find a platform that we could put other small molecules in. We thought hard and we selected curcumin since it's globally known. It has quite a franchise. There's a respected market for it, but it's oral. So what we have working with your pharmacy and ultimately with others is to ensure that we can find a better way to deliver it so all of its properties can be unleashed, and do that in an affordable manner.
What's interesting, there are many companies working tirelessly to improve bioavailability with the oral stuff, and there's been some success, but it still doesn't come close to doing what we do because of the nature of when you release it into the circulation through that pathway, it doesn't get picked up by the blood cells. It doesn't get targeted delivery. So, we really think we have a game changer. And yeah, we're building on, several thousand years of success in India. And they seem to have lower levels of Alzheimer's, of Crohn's disease, a whole number of conditions, which hasn't been proven, but it's speculated that it's due to their high intake of curcumin. So,
I'm going to address the yellow elephant in the room.
What yellow?
Let's look at your nose for a moment.
So, given the practical concerns, I'm so happy your nose is yellow because
my wife won't be.
It is very good because, it addresses some of the issues. What steps has Vascarta taken to ensure kind of like ease of use, minimal lifestyle disruption? I know there's also an ability to put it under the tongue sublingually.
That takes
so
care of it
let's talk on that.
Well, the first thing, our first strategy was to promote T-shirts that said "stain or pain," but we abandoned that.
I like it.
Okay, all right.
Yeah, I think it's great. Stain or pain #.
So we have some people. So I don't care how yellow my knees or elbows or
as long as I'm not
my
in
nose
pain.
gets. And then there are other people who go crazy. No, it's staining things. So it's a high priority for us to develop a strategy to minimize staining. And Richard, why don't you describe how we're talking to patch companies?
Well, that's exactly it. So the product that we've developed with you, Steve, at Town & Country Compounding Pharmacy here in Ramsey, New Jersey, is a first-generation product. It's in a topical format, which is, I think, common in the compounding pharmacy world. So that's our first-generation product. We're very proud of it. It releases the product in a metered dosing manner. So we're happy about that. But from a consumer experience perspective, as you set out, there's a challenge.
Right.
The yellow is not going to go away. So a second generation Vasceptor, for example, is going to be the same product impregnated in a patch system. And we're talking to a leading company in that regard, so that essentially, think of it, although it's not a Johnson & Johnson Band-Aid per se, imagine, at some point in the future, not too far out in the future, when this product becomes approved by the FDA, it'll be in the form of a patch. You open up, you remove the patch from, let's say, a package, and it's all there. You just put it on like a Band-Aid, and you have the product in the middle, and it's released from partitions from the substrate within the bandage, and it goes through the skin, and it kind of holds the gel there, so there's no possibility of it staining your shirt or anything else. I mean, that's
one way to do it.
Yep. Well, it's really the ultimate way, because you want to, if you're going to have a good product, you don't want to antagonize the consumer or the drug patient because they're just satisfied because of the yellow phenomenon.
My husband has a yellow nose.
So right now the point is, it's proof of concept from a drug development standpoint. Hey, can we show that this thing is safe, and can we demonstrate that it's efficacious? And there's a lot of studies that we're doing. I think Joel alluded to some of them. We're doing clinical trials. If you want, we could talk a little bit about that as well. But ultimately, to kind of put a bow on it, it has to be presented in a package system that is easy to use, that's inexpensive, and that doesn't have any adverse effects from the consumer standpoint.
Right now, we do have strategies for the current users.
Right.
So it gets rubbed into the skin. We have a way of rubbing it in with a soft toothbrush or something similar, and that gets it in. It's not a liquid sitting on your skin. And then you can pull, there are various kinds of sleeves that you can pull up, or even the poor man's version, take a sock, cut off the toes, and just pull it up on your knee or elbow or whatever. Mm-hmm. So there are ways to deal with it. It's not ideal, because that's not what people want when they use a product. They want to, but that's what we're going for. But in the meantime, there are people who are suffering with a lot of pain, and they're willing to put up with rubbing it in and pulling up a sleeve or whatever.
One of the questions that we often get, if I can just ask you to answer it, is, hey, I have pain, let's say in my leg. Do I have to put the product on my leg, or can I put it on my arm or some other place where it's easier for me to put a bandage? And what would be the right approach?
It appears that because of the systemic delivery, you will get benefits by applying it at places other than the actual site of the pain. I think you get added benefit if you do it on the actual site. Yeah. But if it's, if you can't reach it or whatever, you can, under the tongue or on another spot on the body. It still seems to work from the feedback we're getting.
Got it. So sublingually, what should patients expect? They should expect
Pretty rapid effects.
Yep.
Yeah.
And in fact, we're studying that in a clinical trial that's about to start.
Excellent, excellent. So with the patent on Vasceptor's high solubility curcumin formulation, how do you envision this competitive edge affecting its kind of like long-term market position compared to oral topical pain products? Kind of going into like maybe what you said before, because you can put other things into this kind of gel, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
We're working on that.
So I can kind of give you the overall business strategy, which is it's a platform technology, right? So the gel is the patented platform, and so many small molecules can go in there. So this is just the first of many products that are going to be developed and eventually commercialized here and around the world. So that's the first thing. The second thing is this first product, Vasceptor, is essentially agnostic when it comes to inflammation. So while we're going to be pursuing our first two indications with the US FDA, which are sickle cell disease, a small market, and osteoarthritis, a very large market, they're both inflammatory in nature. So those are the two that we're pursuing initially, but there's a whole array of other indications eventually that can be pursued, such as type 2 diabetes, you mentioned that, such as lupus is something that we could potentially pursue. Cancer itself is, so we're looking at that with the Mayo Clinic, right? You know, other ways. One other thing I might point out to you is that although we're a young company, we're only 4 years old, we did something quite unusual a couple years ago. We reached out to the FDA itself, specifically CBER, the biological branch, and spoke to a chief of one of the divisions there that we both know, and there was an agreement to sign what's called an RCA, which we did. It's a research collaboration agreement, and as unusual as it might seem for industry, especially a small, not well-known company, to partner, quote unquote, with the FDA, we did. So we signed the agreement. What it means is that research is now being done, it has been done, inside FDA's own laboratories, in which they've demonstrated that this product, the Vasceptor, which is this curcumin gel, when it is actually added to human blood, extends the refrigerated storage time of blood.
Wow.
So by at least 1 week. So that's substantial in turn. It has potential civilian and military applications. So that blood, there's a nationwide shortage of donors. The new generation does not donate blood as to the degree that older generations like ours have. So there's fewer donors, but there's still the same need for blood. And so if you can find a way to extend its usable shelf life in a refrigerated manner,
Just decreasing waste. Yeah.
and before
That was the first try.
The beauty of that is that data was generated inside the FDA, and we're publishing it with them. We're actually co-authoring a paper with them. So I think that adds some additional legitimacy to the product and its utility. Beyond that, we also showed that when you take the Vasceptor and you mix it with blood, it increases the circulating lifespan of the blood by at least 10%, that in a guinea pig model. So there's innumerable things that the product can do. We're trying to be very focused, Steve, and just deal with a couple indications, which is which we've embarked upon, which we can talk about if you'd like.
But this FDA study is really opening the door to considering using blood cells as therapeutic entities by virtue of loading them up with curcumin and so on.
And that's one of the
PRP almost, kind of like, okay, interesting.
That's one of the things that investors are particularly interested in, because when they're looking at us versus other opportunities to invest, what is the upside for this? And when they see our data and they look at the applications for this first product within the gel, and what it can presage in terms of diabetes and lupus and cancer and sickle cell, etc. They're all inflammatory related diseases. You're clearly talking about a multi-billion-dollar product, and that's just here in this country. And as I mentioned to you earlier, we are actively in the process of getting this product registered around the world, where the barrier to getting registered is much lower than it is here. So we think within a relatively short period of time, we're going to be a commercial company, and we're really very excited about that. And there's many other studies that we're doing on the animal side, aging. I think you pointed that out as well.
Yeah, the aging is really exciting. This is with a leading researcher in the anti-aging community at my institution. There's a whole anti-aging center. We've shown you take old decrepit mice and you treat topically for a couple of weeks, and you turn them into teenagers. Both physical activity, cognition, and then you look at the organs, and decreased in markers of inflammation in kidney, liver, and so on. The marker that recently was in the newspaper that's connected, it's a Harvard study that showed that you can extend lifetime by reducing this particular cytokine. We lower it with the curcumin.
Wow.
And then in the heart, we actually can get the heart to start remodeling itself, to go from an old decrepit heart to a young heart.
Wow.
Currently, if you have congestive heart failure, there's no treatment for it other than heart transplant.
Heart cells are not good at repairing themselves.
We turn on the mechanisms for that. So lot to do, but huge upside. And then around the world there are other conditions, not so much here. So we're exploring relationship with Brazil. Chagas disease is a horrific disease in Central and South America, caused by the kissing bug. No known cure, just creates massive vascular inflammation and costs society a fortune.
Wow.
There's studies showing that curcumin has a lot of promise in that regard. So again, enhanced delivery of curcumin, huge upside to that.
Let's do like a run through of the preclinical research.
Sure.
So like you touched on the anti-aging at Einstein. What are some of the other preclinical research that you're doing?
A number of studies looking at the effect of our topical formulation on inflammatory triggers and how it affects the endothelium, this endothelial dysfunction.
Mm-hmm.
So studies where we use lipopolysaccharides, which triggers septic shock and so on. We've shown so far, and we're continuing to do more studies, it can act like a prophylactic. So if you give it before you're hit up with the LPS, it prevents the onset of massive inflammation. And after the inflammation's kicked in, it can ramp it down. Mm-hmm. Similarly, there's a molecule called L-name, which shuts down nitric oxide production in the vasculature and creates endothelial dysfunction. Mm-hmm. So we've shown that curcumin will allow the system to maintain its antioxidative stress enzymes and so on. And as soon as you stop the L-name, in a normal animal that's not being treated, the hypertension and inflammation persists for substantial amounts of time. Whereas if you're treating with curcumin, it goes back to normal almost immediately.
Wow. There's a couple of other studies too worth mentioning, and that is in the sickle cell space, which is the first one, if I can point out, is the work that we're doing with the University of California at Irvine, which is essentially a humanized sickle cell model in mice. So the mice that have the human sickle cell gene that present the phenotypic traits of sickle cell, that group was able to demonstrate, and that article, that their work is soon to be published with them in combination with the FDA as well, by the way. We were able to demonstrate that there's less pain felt by the mice that have the human sickle cell gene, among other things.
Almost immediately,
Almost
we have a plot, within a day.
Wow.
So that's called the Burke model. And then there's another group that we've been working with, an industrial lab in Maryland called Song Biotechnologies, in which they demonstrated that our product, when it's added to a rat model that is receiving human sickle cells, so it's called an exchange transfusion model, when the product is applied prophylactically, prevents vaso-occlusive crisis, VOC.
Wow.
VOC is the primary endpoint that the FDA is looking for to approve a new sickle cell disease drug. You may know that recently a couple leading products have been withdrawn. Pfizer withdrew its product Oxbryta, a product that they purchased from Global Blood for $5.4 billion. And within a couple years, they just took it off the market about 2 months ago. Novartis just removed Adakveo from Europe because it's not working.
It's tough to treat condition.
You have two other companies that recently got approval from the FDA maybe 2 years ago, 3 years ago for gene therapy. It's fantastic, it's curative. One is $2.2 million, the other is $3.1 million.
Buy one, get one free.
Right, so when I recently went to a conference in Florida to meet with these companies to kind of learn more about what's going on, since we're such a new player, I asked one of the companies, well, how many patients do you have? And there was a pause, and they said, 1. So the point is, without being flippant about it, there really is, and I think the agency realizes that, is if there's a science-based approach here, for something that's easy to use, that is known to be safe, as you pointed out. Curcumin is GRAS, capital letters, GRAS, generally regarded as safe orally. And the other excipients that we use are also known to be safe, that which our course is proprietary. But that is a safe approach to deliver something smartly. It's, in essence, build a better mousetrap. And it's affordably priced compared to all the others. You have a chance to move the needle and satisfy an unmet medical need, and do something that the healthcare system is looking for, which is an affordable medicine and not something that's going to literally cost more than any individual can afford or what the healthcare system can withstand. There is great pressures from a pharmacoeconomic perspective, and that is something that we're very conscious about. We want to be part of the solution, not just in terms of here's a new medicine for the national toolkit, as it were, but we also want to be responsible, especially from a political point of view. If you look at what's going on, both parties are insisting, and properly so, that we tamp down drug prices so that they could become more affordable, and that is part of our approach as well.
Yeah.
One of the important things with sickle cell is that it starts at birth, as do other genetic disorders that create chronic inflammation through life. Most of the current drugs are not really suitable for young kids. Hydroxyurea is given. It's hard to get it down kids' throat. They don't like taking it. Works
It's a big pill.
It's a big pill, and it doesn't, it works moderately well. If the results of our animal studies translate to humans, we don't just have a slight increment, we have a game changer, because we're stabilizing the red blood cell, which basically drives the inflammation. If there is inflammation, it damps down the inflammation, stops the pain. I just read that curcumin actually stimulates the production of fetal hemoglobin, which is another strategy for improvement. So it's the quadra, penta factor in terms of covering all the bases for sickle cell. So this is huge. So again, we're going to be doing this study very soon, and if it works in humans the way it does in the animals, we're going to provide a real gift for these poor patients who go through hell throughout their life.
Yep. And on the cost-effective side, up until recently, there was only a $200 and $300 option. We formulated recently a $50 compound option, just to give people like a trial option, because $200 to try something is tough.
That's right.
So if you're a patient in one of our 22 states, your doctor can order the 1 milliliter version of this product, $50. You can try it. Order now, and you get one free. Just kidding.
But to that point, before we move on to the next thing, if you apply the product daily, each time you click the top, you click a 0.05 mil comes out. We're recommending, I think, a standard dose 0.1, which would be 2 clicks. So if you actually do the math, I mean, it could last for, daily use for a couple of weeks or so. And it's enough time to be able to get it in effect. Can I briefly mention what we're doing in the clinic?
Absolutely.
Right.
Do it.
So thank you. So although we're young, as I mentioned, we did our first clinical trial coming up on 3 years ago. We did our initial trial in the early stages of COVID. We're actually interested in doing a COVID clinical trial in India, but around the time, and we got a kind of like an approval from a hospital there that was ready for us, and then all of a sudden the patients vanished, either because they died or they ran out of, and so we kind of lost the window. But we did do a healthy volunteer study, 48 healthy volunteers in India, double-blinded, placebo-controlled, randomized. We worked with you guys in that regard. You actually helped us with that clinical trial. It was sent over, zero adverse events, tolerable profile, which was very, very good. And it was initial demonstration of transdermal delivery. So we kind of knew that, but we proved it. It was our first effort. So we have 2 major trials that are starting in 2025, which is really going to be a foundational year for us. One is in sickle cell and the other one is in osteoarthritis. The sickle cell is a pilot study, and as you alluded to before, half the patients will get the product sublingually. The other half will get it topically, because we want to see what route of administration might be better, if any. So is it going to be essentially equivalent? They'll get the product twice a week for 4 weeks. Blood will be drawn on a weekly basis, and we're going to be looking for what effects, if any, on pain, what effect, if any, on inflammatory markers, what effect, if any, on hematological properties. And so that study that's going to take place in 2025 will kind of then demonstrate, hopefully, and complement the work that's been done in animal models that have sickle cell. And then that presents a very attractive opportunity for a strategic partner if they wanted to partner with us to continue the development and commercialization of the product for sickle cell. That's one. That work is going to be done in the United States. We're doing a second study at the same time in Australia, and that is in osteoarthritis in the elderly that are somewhat intolerant to edstins that Joe was talking about. And that's a 60-patient trial, and it's randomized, double-blinded, placebo-controlled. And there we're going to be looking at what effect does the product have on quality of life issues, right? Is there a reduction of pain? This is knee pain. Now, do I feel better? Am I able, do I have more mobility? That sort of thing. We're also going to collect urine samples to see whether or not the use of Vasceptor on these patients who take it, I think, over the course of a few months, what effect does it have, if any, on a reduction in the proteins that are voided through the urine versus a placebo?
Right, that correlate with cartilage damage and repair.
So those clinical trials, on top of the one that we did a couple years ago, on top of all the preclinical efficacy studies, which are ongoing, which are beginning now to enter the scientific literature, the peer-reviewed scientific literature, we think puts us in a very appealing position to move forward with FDA, which is our goal, is to get an IND open with the FDA at some point before the end of 2025. As I mentioned to you before, at the same time that we are actively pursuing trying to get the product registered in other territories around the country where getting it approved is probably going to be somewhat less restrictive because they have a more accommodating approach vis-a-vis curcumin, because it's just known to be safe.
Got it. And what additional benefits has research suggested that Vasceptor might offer in aging, athletic performance, or other emerging areas? And how might these opportunities contribute to Vascarta's broader strategic growth? I actually went to an anti-aging conference in Boston recently, and a lot of the things that I'm hearing, nitric oxide, all this stuff, it's a lot of things that were echoed at this conference. So what other...
Well, we intend to really bust this whole thing wide open. We have a paper that should be coming out this year, that aging mouse study, where I don't think there's ever been another product that's done as much benefit with respect to anti-aging activity. It's, there are a lot of these sexy molecules out there, rapamycin, this IL-11 that Harvard was talking about.
Yeah, rapamycin is very popular now, yep.
Yeah, curcumin does the same thing. And rapamycin is very hard to deliver, and it's very expensive.
Yep.
So anyway, I'm anticipating when this publication comes out, we're going to have the anti-aging people all over us. Plus, our lead author is a major player in this field. He's connected to all these people, and we're just lying low until we can. The other thing is that curcumin is known to accelerate healing of stressed muscles, of aches and pains. One of the really dramatic anecdotal results we got, plantar fasciitis, incredibly painful.
Yeah.
Totally will make life miserable for an athlete.
Mm-hmm.
The physician who applied it to a patient with plantar fasciitis was flabbergasted. Before the patient left the office, the pain went away.
Wow.
It usually takes weeks for plantar fasciitis to calm down.
Yeah.
So there's things like that. This is long range. Those of us who love to play football know that there's a real price to pay in terms of severe cognitive consequences later on in life.
Yep.
I'm of the opinion, based on everything I know about curcumin, you start taking that early on in your career, you're likely to minimize the likelihood of that happening, because we know it gets into the brain. Curcumin's a potent anti-inflammatory. It operates on all the microglia, the astrocytes, and so on, all those that play a role in creating neuroinflammation. So we think it has a huge promise. And again, we can't do everything.
Yeah, you have to focus, because if it hits all these things, you can't study everything at the same time.
That's right.
You got to prioritize.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I really appreciate you guys coming over and talking about this. Like, I knew obviously about the product before, but even for me, this was like eye-opening, and I'm really excited to see where this is going to go. All right. Thank you so much, guys.
Thank you, Steve.
Thank you.
All right. And thank you for listening.